Today on Corinne's Picks, we have Rukuumba Nedd. Today on Corinne's Picks, we are very grateful to have Rukuumba Nedd. He's a brilliant artist from Georgia. Rukuumba, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me on your program.
Now, I'm very familiar with your work. Can you tell us, the audience, a little bit about the work that you do, your art and the work that you do?
Yes, I am a contemporary artist. I began my work in the Caribbean. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago originally, and I started painting from childhood. I painted all of my life. There's another career that I'm married to painting, and that is education. I always felt as a child that I wanted to give back, and so I became an art educator, and that's my career. I have been able to work in the Caribbean and did a whole lot of my work in the islands. I spent 1 year in England as an artist, working at a school in Birmingham, and I'm currently residing in Georgia, and I teach art here as an art educator in Georgia.
Okay.
That sums it up.
Okay. I know that we have 11 of your images. I don't want to spend too much time talking about myself. I would love it if we could show some of your work and you can basically tell us a little bit about each painting.
I'll be glad to.
Thank you. So can we have the first slide?
Yes, this piece was created probably about 5 years ago. It was created for the Caribbean American Month, which is June, celebrated across the United States. And it was created to give to one of the presenters, the guest speakers. The piece features aspects of the Caribbean life, with both Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago highlighted. There's also an image of an African female just above Bob Marley's head. Of course, the image in the middle is Bob Marley, which represents the woman or the matriarch in African and African American families. To the left of the picture, you see the steel band piece, and of course, below that, a player playing the steel drums, and below that you have Tobago, a shot or piece from Tobago, or a rendering from Tobago, whereas on the right you have featured aspects of Caribbean life. You have a mother and child going to the beach, a dancer, and architecture that is typical of the islands. So the piece Caribbean Man was created to represent the island. It was given at the Caribbean American Heritage Month Festival to the guest speaker.
Okay, can we have the next photo, please?
This piece, the initial rendering was done in Trinidad, and it features images of the steel drums, the bass drums and tenors, as well as players in motion. The piece tries to depict the rhythm. There are lines to the left of it that creates a pattern, and it shows that steel band music is rhythmical. Below the pan is called a pan in harmony, and when you listen to steel band music, it's very harmonious. It's very, very harmonious. One of the things that I try to do with my images to connect it to the steel band is I use genre in terms of how we talk about music. Actually, one of the Calypsonians, one of the veteran Calypsonians in Trinidad, he produced a piece called Pan in A minor, and that too influenced the naming of the piece, the rendering of the piece, and the fact that it celebrates steel band music, which Trinidad gave to the world in the last century.
It's very, very, very interesting. I'm really appreciating your work because, as you know, I'm also from the Caribbean. So a lot of the things you're saying that are Trinidadian are also part of my culture as well. So I'm really appreciating your work. Can we see
Right.
the next image, please?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Some of the things that I have learned since I'm here in the United States is that there's a disconnect between the Caribbean and people who live in the South. And what I have found over the years is that many of the people who live in the South could trace their origins back to the islands. You know, the Gucci people, Savannah rings a bell, and people came in to the South from the islands via Savannah. Later on, they all moved up to Belize, and a lot of them were removed from the islands, and they, in fact, some of the people moved to Belize. But there's still evidence of that transition from the islands into South America. And when you again look at the ways of life and the culture that was practiced by the people in the South, it bears resemblance to some of the things that we do and some of the practices that we have in the Caribbean.
That's very true. Let's look at the next painting. Maybe you could explain some more about the steel pan.
Right. Again, this is just parts of this was included in the last image, but this shows the rhythm. The patterns represents the rhythm, the movement in the steel band, in steel band music, and the harmony that these pan players or musicians have been able to capture using steel drums. Originally, the steel band came out of the African American trying to find a way to free themselves. And so in the 1940s, just prior to the World War, or just around the world, First and Second World War, the Africans living on the slave plantations were allowed to celebrate around harvest time. And what they would do is they would try to play their music as well as drink the rum and celebrate probably a whole year of working in the fields and trying to make a connection back to Africa. Interestingly enough, around that time, the Trinidad government banned the playing of drums. And that didn't stop the Negroes or the African Americans the Africans who were there, who were slaves at that time, from continuing to celebrate and from trying to find ways to, connect with Africa and to some of the cultural practices they have. And so initially they used bamboo, they used bottle with our water, and then they got hold of what we had at that time was the trash pans that was made out of tinning. And then, of course, on the shores, there were thousands upon thousands of oil drums. They took the oil drums, and then the same process of burning the drum and beating it until you get different notes. They did that until the drums were able to produce songs that parallel musical instruments. So this piece takes us all the way back. It's kind of deep. I use the greens and oranges and so on that is typical of the islands, but it also shows growth, a new beginning, a new musical instrument given to the world, and that puts all in perspective the piece or what is behind this piece.
So the steel drum was invented in Trinidad, but it's actually spread throughout the Caribbean and throughout the world.
Yes,
Okay.
it is. And that is sometimes contentious because some islands claim that it started, but when in their islands, but when you go all the way back, there were two things that was created in Trinidad, and then it both came as the slaves were celebrating the harvesting of the canes. The steel band was one, and calypso was the other one. And so steel band and calypso has a close connection because the musicians and the artists would create the calypsos, and then the musicians would play out that music on the drums. And it's a really deep and profound history that is related to the steel band and calypso.
But also calypso comes out of the tradition, like in Senegal and several West African countries, where the singer is actually the storyteller, the person who preserves the history and passes it on. And calypso does the same thing. Calypso was originally, you would be able to mask political resentments or different things that were going on. You could mask it in song.
Right. And that hasn't stopped. From the birth of calypso until now, calypsonians still do it.
Definitely.
Interestingly, however, I had the opportunity to go to Ghana, and both calypso, the beginnings, they were all brought back to the New World from Africa. Even reggae, you find remnants of reggae in Ghana. So a lot of the slaves that came to the islands came out of the Gold Coast. They came from the West Coast. And you see aspects, like you say, storytelling through music and through song. It's all there where it began in Africa. There's also something in Africa called Panifest. And I was amazed to see the connections between Panifest and Carnival that is practiced so widely in the islands.
Okay, so let's look at the next image, please.
Yes, this is a little girl. She's one of two girls that went to Panama. The Atlanta public school system, they had a program with Clark Atlanta universities where teachers were allowed to travel all over the world. And so my wife and I had the opportunity to go to Panama, and one of our colleagues, her husband was there and her children were there with us. And this little girl, her smile, her essence, her eyes, the way she looked, captures so much of what it is or what it means to be an African American that I decided I would create a picture of her. One of the things that is peculiar, interesting about the piece is, even though it looks like brushwork and it mimics more traditional art, I use the computer, what I call a new medium, to help me to render this piece. And I have been able to master the use of the computer as a medium, an art medium, that mimics charcoal paintings, sketches, oil paints, and even acrylic painting. Today they call that type of printing G-clays, and within the last 10 years, G-clays have become very, very prominent in the art world. So again, you could see her smile, her inviting smile, and it's sort of charismatic, the way and the mood she generates with that smile in this piece.
Okay, so we're going to take a deep break. We're going to go to commercial, and when we get back, we'll talk some more about your paintings and your work.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hang with a gypsy, hang with a gypsy, hang with a gypsy girl. Hang with a gypsy, hang with a gypsy, hang with a gypsy girl.
we're talking to Rukuumba Nedd about his work reflecting West Indian, specifically Trinidadian culture. Um, Thank you for being on the show again. Let's go back
Thanks.
to
It's
some
great to
more
be
of
here.
your images. I know that we have 6 more images left.
This piece actually was created. Part of what I do is in education, and this was at a conference in DeKalb County in Georgia. The two people in the middle are art coordinators. One is the performing, visual and performing arts. That's the female, and the male is the coordinator for music. And the piece was gendered live at a show or at what we call a pre-service workshop that we had a couple of years ago. We had musicians, we had a couple of teachers on stage painting a piece, an abstract piece, and I was able during that time to put the whole piece together and to collect. You see in the middle of the piece, the art teachers painting, and they're surrounded by different artists performing and playing different instruments, and to the top you see some singing. The background spaces are images or aspects of the pieces that painting that was done. One of the advantages of the digital media is that you could on the spot create so many different images or so many different ways of looking at a piece or taking an idea and composing it and producing the type of conceptual art that you see here. Very powerful and very meaningful to me is the middle of the piece. You have the eyes of a child, and that is, in terms of the way I look at the world, children are so very important. That those eyes in the middle is the inquisitive mind of a young child who's out there trying to find meaning and trying to find understanding of all that is happening around him. I just love the clip that you had during the break. Young minds are out there questioning what was slavery, what is slavery, why is slavery, why did people do to other people the things that was done during slavery. Some of the things that I have put together is the whole concept of cultural cannibalism, and I want to thank you and thank the studio for allowing me to continue to promote and preserve Caribbean culture, because cultural cannibalism is one culture that embraces all the other cultures but eats up a culture and so enslave people. When you say slavery is still alive, it's done even through culture and the respect or disrespect for culture of one culture over the other.
Absolutely, I would agree with you, and I think I'm very, very pleased with young people today who are trying to rediscover their African heritage and who are embracing their African heritage. I know that, as children, that wasn't something that was encouraged, but I'm glad that, the younger generations realize that to be an American doesn't mean that you have to throw away who you are.
Right.
So who are some of your, I want to look at some more of your art, but I was curious, you're trying to influence people by putting up a lot of historical figures and trying to promote our history. Who are some of your influences?
In the Caribbean, we have, in Trinidad, in fact, Leroy Clark is a big artist in Trinidad, and he influenced my work a lot. I also have Corinne, who was a watercolorist, and Marcelo, Carly Harris. They were different artists who embraced us as children, and there was what was called the Trinidad and Tobago Art Society, and there were a group of us, sort of avant-garde small group, that these artists surrounded, and they were there working with us and encouraging us and passing on their skills and the things that they know onto us. Bosco Holder is another, if I can name them. When I came to the United States, I started to inquire and to find out about the history of the islands. And I came to find out Wilfredo Lam from Jamaica influenced the work of Leroy Clark. And then I looked at Wilfredo Lam, and it's amazing that Wilfredo Lam, I guess in the early 60s, 50s, and 60s, was respected in France and all over the world as a great artist. He was Chinese, I think, but his work reflected a lot of African symbolism and African images. And similarly to Picasso, when you look at the work, you see the way that they looked at form from different perspectives, from different planes, and also included the deep meaning of African culture, African spiritualism in the work. So those are the influences, those are the things that help me a lot in terms of the work that I create and the background behind it. I know as a child, I was I felt robbed because Trinidad was colonized. And I talk about cultural cannibalism. What I learned in school was most of the things I learned from England. The whole education system was based on England, and we were evaluated and assessed with England. All our textbooks, our reading books, they all came out of England. And so most of the things I learned, even though I was a Trinidadian, I learned about English culture, and I emulated and tried to be a little Englishman, similar to my compatriots in Barbados. So I always was very inquisitive about the African part of me. There's something inside of me that felt that I need to make the connection. And later on in life, I was able to make that connection and saw that there was a connection with the things that I like, the things I do, the steel band, carnival. It all had its connections with Africa. And so it is sort of a part of our history that was taken away from us. And like I said, some of the artists helped me to realize where Africans came from and how the things that they did and painted, the way they looked at what they made, the contribution they make to society, had or displayed or showed that Africanisms and African culture was a vital part of Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the islands, the rest of the Caribbean.
Absolutely. So let's look at, we have like 4 minutes left. I want to make sure that I get through all of your artwork. So let's look at the next image. Maybe you can explain the photo.
Yes, this piece, when I came to the South, my work, when I came to Atlanta, the Atlantans called my work ethnic. And so some of the things that I had to do is I had to look at the experience of blacks in the South. And part of it was the whole fact that everybody had to pick cotton. All the slaves were in cotton plantations. So this piece depicts that period where Africans, in order to survive, had to be on the plantations picking cotton. But it also shows, again, the matriarch, that female essence that was so important in our whole history. The matriarch picking cotton, contributing to our existence. And this piece is called the Cotton Picker. This piece was actually done for Media One. Media One preceded Comcast, which we know today. Comcast gave me, or they commissioned me to do a number of pieces of work to put in schools across America. And this was the very first piece. It's called An Education Connection. And it features education, people who founded education or prominent people in education in the South. Of course, you have Benjamin Mays, well-known educator. You have Booker T. Washington. You have the two females next to them. They founded the first elementary schools in the South. And of course, you have Mahalia Jackson. And then you have images that show, other images that show the black family, the cables, and of course the cameras, in as much as it was um, Media One, which was a cable company coming into existence at the time. Again, prominent in the middle, it's a child, which is all these parts of the images that I try to create, showing how important we need to pass on our history to, our heritage to. And of course, again, the piece is called Education Connection, and Media One folded because Comcast bought it over. And so the project didn't go any further, but I have the original piece of it and several. We made about 1,000 copies of it and passed it on to different educational institutions.
Okay, so we have about a minute left. We'll have to
Okay.
have you back on the show again to finish looking at some more of your work. But just in the time we have left, what plans do you have in terms of upcoming works of art, or what projects do you have right now in the making?
Last year I had a show at the South Fulton Art Center. It celebrated or commemorated Caribbean American Month, and it featured my life as an artist from my first piece that I created until the last piece that I did. I have several pieces in my studio right now. I have a studio in Atlanta, and I'm in my possession, and I had them all featured at the show. Going forward, I will continue teaching, and probably for the next 3 to 5 years. One of the things that I want to do as I transition out of education is to write about art, to write about our history, write about our culture, and try to leave that information so that others could benefit from it.
So it was wonderful having you on the show. They've
Right?
given me a signal that we've basically run out of time, but we can
Good.
always do a part two. I really enjoyed seeing your images, and I really am grateful that you were able to meet with you over Skype today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
All right, thank you.
Okay.